Good evening, friends. Tonight we'll drift into the quiet corners of medieval bedchambers, where sleep was both simpler and far stranger than anything we know today. Dim your lights, settle under your blanket, and let your breathing slow as we explore the gentle mysteries of how people found rest in centuries past. Let me know in the comments where you are from and what time it is. I love hearing from fellow night owls around the world. If this calm journey helps you unwind, tap like and subscribe, only if it feels right. Tonight, we'll discover 7 peculiar sleeping habits from the Middle Ages that might surprise you, comfort you, or simply carry you into peaceful dreams. Close your eyes if you'd like, and let my voice guide you through moonlit monasteries, humble peasant cottages, and grand castle chambers where sleep came wrapped in traditions we've long forgotten.
Let me tell you about a time when sleep wasn't the single unbroken stretch we know today. Picture yourself in a medieval village around 1250, where the rhythm of rest followed an ancient pattern that might seem odd to our modern minds. As darkness fell, and it fell early and completely in those days before electric lights, people would settle in to their first sleep of the night. Imagine lying on a straw mattress wrapped in rough woolen blankets, listening to the soft crackle of dying embers in the hearth nearby. The first sleep, as historians now call it, would carry you deep into dreams for about 4 hours. But here's where it gets interesting. Around midnight, or 1 in the morning, you would naturally wake up, not from any disturbance, but because this was simply how human sleep worked before we changed it. This wakeful period between sleeps wasn't considered insomnia or a problem to solve. Instead, it was a treasured time called the watching hour, or sometimes the quiet time. Picture yourself stirring in that medieval bed, fully alert but peaceful, as if your body knew exactly what it was doing. The cottage around you would be still, save for perhaps the gentle breathing of family members nearby, or the distant hoot of an owl outside your shuttered window. What did people do during these wakeful hours? They didn't toss and turn with worry about getting back to sleep. That anxiety is largely a modern invention. Instead, they might lie quietly and pray, offering up gentle thoughts to their Maker in the soft darkness. Some would light a single candle, precious and expensive, so used sparingly, and read religious texts or write letters by the flickering golden light. Couples often used this time for intimate conversation, sharing thoughts and dreams in whispered tones that wouldn't wake the children sleeping nearby. It was during these quiet midnight hours that many medieval love poems speak of lovers sharing their deepest secrets. The darkness created a kind of sacred space where normal social barriers fell away, and people could speak more freely than in the harsh light of day. Sometimes, if the moon was bright enough, people would even rise and tend to small tasks. They might check on livestock, add wood to a dying fire, or simply step outside to gaze at the stars, those brilliant medieval skies unmarred by any light pollution. The night air would be crisp and clean, carrying the scent of wood smoke and earth, maybe the distant fragrance of night-blooming flowers in a monastery garden. Scholars and scribes treasured these midnight hours for their work. By candlelight, they would copy manuscripts, their quill pens scratching softly across parchment in the profound quiet. There's something almost magical about imagining these scholarly monks bent over their writing desks in stone cells, preserving knowledge while the world slept around them. The scratch of quill on parchment, the soft drip of wax, the rustle of turning pages, these were the gentle sounds of midnight in learned circles. After an hour or two of this peaceful wakefulness, people would naturally feel drowsiness returning. They'd snuff out their candles, settle back into their beds, and drift into what they called the second sleep, or morning sleep. This second rest would carry them until dawn, when the first cock would crow and the working day would begin. This pattern was so common that it appears throughout medieval literature. Characters in stories would naturally speak of their first sleep and second sleep as distinct periods. Court records mention crimes committed after first sleep, and medical texts of the time describe different types of dreams that occurred in each sleep period. It wasn't unusual. It was simply the way human beings slept for thousands of years.
The transition between these two sleeps was often marked by a shift in the type of rest people experienced. The first sleep was typically deeper, filled with the body's most restorative processes. The second sleep was often lighter, more dream-filled, with people reporting more vivid and memorable dreams in those pre-dawn hours. Some believed that dreams from the second sleep were more prophetic, carrying messages from the divine realm. Interestingly, this two-sleep pattern began to fade as artificial lighting became more common. By the late 1600s and early 1700s, as candles became cheaper and oil lamps more widespread, people began staying awake later into the evening. The extended wakeful period gradually shifted the entire sleep schedule, eventually consolidating into the single long sleep we know today. But imagine for a moment what we might have lost in this change. That peaceful hour of midnight wakefulness, that gentle transition between sleeps, that quiet time for reflection and intimacy. In our rush toward efficiency and productivity, we may have abandoned one of humanity's most natural and restorative rhythms. As you settle into your own sleep tonight,
perhaps you can appreciate this ancient pattern. If you find yourself naturally waking in the small hours, instead of worrying about it, you might simply lie quietly and listen to the night sounds around you. Feel the weight of your blankets, the softness of your pillow, the gentle rhythm of your breathing. In those moments, you're connecting with centuries of human experience, following a pattern as old as civilization itself. The medieval sleeper knew something we've forgotten, that rest doesn't always mean unconsciousness, that peace can be found in quiet wakefulness, and that the night holds its own gentle wisdom. Let their ancient rhythm guide you now as you drift deeper into your own dreams, carrying with you the soft knowledge of how sleep once was, gentle and accepting and perfectly, naturally human.
Now, let your mind wander to the heart of a medieval household, where privacy, as we know it, simply didn't exist, and sleep was a decidedly communal affair. Picture stepping into a typical peasant cottage, or even a modest noble house around 1300, where the very concept of separate bedrooms was as foreign as electric lights or running water. In these times, the great hall, or main room of a house, served multiple purposes throughout the day and night. As evening approached, you'd watch as the same space that hosted meals, conversations, and daily work would transform into a collective bedroom. Straw mattresses would be pulled from corners, blankets unfolded, and sleeping pallets arranged across the floor, like a patchwork quilt of resting humanity. Imagine lying down among a dozen or more family members, servants, guests, and even strangers who might have sought shelter for the night. The sound of gentle breathing would create a soft symphony around you, different rhythms and depths blending together like a natural lullaby. A grandmother's wheeze, a child's quick little breaths, the deep sighs of working men finally at rest, all weaving together in the darkness. This wasn't considered strange or uncomfortable. It was simply life. Warmth was precious in those days, and bodies pressed together provided vital heat during cold months. You might find yourself sleeping beside your siblings, your parents nearby, perhaps a traveling merchant who'd been granted hospitality for the night. The shared warmth was practical, but it also created a sense of security and belonging that we've largely lost today. In grander households, even the nobility often shared sleeping spaces. The lord and lady of a castle might have their own bed, a massive wooden structure hung with heavy curtains for some semblance of privacy, but their chamber would also house several servants who slept on pallets at the foot of the bed. These servants weren't just there to serve. They were guards, companions, and sources of warmth in the drafty stone chambers. Picture the gentle sounds
that would fill these communal sleeping spaces. Besides breathing, you'd hear the rustle of straw as someone shifted position, the soft murmur of prayers being whispered in the darkness, maybe the gentle humming of a mother soothing a restless child. Sometimes you'd hear quiet conversations, people sharing thoughts, concerns, or simply the small intimacies that darkness allows. The smells of these shared spaces tell their own story. Wood smoke from banked fires would mingle with the earthy scent of straw mattresses, the lanolin smell of woolen blankets, and the simple human sense of people living closely together. There might be a hint of herbs, lavender or rosemary, tucked between the blankets to ward off fleas and freshen the air. These weren't unpleasant aromas, but the natural perfume of medieval life, as familiar and comforting as any modern air freshener. In monasteries, this communal sleeping reached its most organized form. Picture rows of simple beds in long dormitories where dozens of monks would retire together after their evening prayers. The silence would be profound, but not empty, filled with the gentle sounds of men at peace, their breathing synchronized in rest after days of shared prayers and work. A single oil lamp might burn at each end of the dormitory, casting long shadows and providing just enough light for anyone who needed to rise for midnight prayers. These monastic dormitories often had fascinating architectural features designed for communal rest. Stone pillars would separate sleeping areas just enough to provide a sense of individual space while maintaining the communal feeling. Small windows placed high in the walls would let in starlight and moonbeams that would dance across the stone floors. The acoustics were often designed so that a single voice, perhaps reading evening prayers, could be heard clearly throughout the space. Children grew up never knowing the experience of sleeping alone. A medieval child would drift off to sleep surrounded by the comforting presence of family, learning from infancy that rest comes in community. They'd fall asleep to lullabies sung by mothers or grandmothers, their voices carrying across the shared space to comfort not just their own children, but any little ones who might be having trouble settling down. Safety was another crucial aspect of communal sleeping. In an era when threats could come from wild animals, bandits, or hostile neighbors, sleeping in groups provided security that individuals simply couldn't achieve alone. Someone was always partially alert, and any disturbance would quickly wake multiple people who could respond to danger. The social aspects of communal sleeping were equally important. These shared spaces were where many intimate conversations took place, where family stories were passed down, where the day's events were processed and understood. Young people would learn about adult concerns by overhearing whispered discussions, and children would absorb the rhythms and values of their community through these nighttime proximities. Interestingly, this communal approach to sleep created its own etiquette and customs. People learned to move quietly, to be considerate of others' rest, and to share resources like blankets or pillows when needed. There were unspoken rules about where different family members or social ranks would sleep, creating order within the seeming chaos. The practice began to change as wealth increased and houses grew larger, but even well into the Renaissance, truly private bedrooms remained luxuries for only the very wealthy. Most people continued to share sleeping spaces well into the 16th and 17th centuries, and in many rural areas, communal family sleeping continued much longer. As you rest tonight in your private space, you might imagine what it would feel like to be surrounded by the gentle presence of others at rest. The security of knowing you're not alone, the shared warmth of community, the soft sounds of others breathing peacefully nearby. In some ways, our modern isolation at sleep might be more unusual than the communal rest that sustained humanity for most of its history. Let the idea of this gentle community settle around you now, imagining yourself surrounded not by strangers, but by the warm presence of those who care about you, all of you drifting together into peaceful dreams, carried by the ancient rhythm of shared rest.
Allow your breathing to slow even further as we explore the deeply spiritual relationship medieval people had with sleep, where the transition from wakefulness to dreams was considered sacred, requiring careful rituals and prayers that transformed every bedtime into a gentle ceremony of protection and peace. In medieval times, sleep wasn't simply a biological necessity. It was a vulnerable state requiring divine protection. Picture yourself as a medieval person preparing for bed around 1400, beginning your night with rituals as important as any meal blessing or Sunday service. The approach of sleep was never casual, never taken for granted, because people understood that in slumber the soul became exposed to both heavenly visions and demonic influences. The evening prayers, or compline, as they were known in religious communities, marked the official end of each day. Even in humble peasant cottages, families would gather before retiring, kneeling together on rough wooden floors while the father or eldest member would recite protection prayers. Their voices would be soft in the firelight, asking for guardian angels to watch over their rest, for protection from nightmares, and for peaceful dreams that might bring divine guidance. Imagine the gentle power of these shared moments. Entire household united in acknowledging their vulnerability, asking together for protection through the dangerous hours of darkness. Children would learn these prayers before they could properly speak, absorbing the rhythm and comfort of ritual protection.
The words themselves became like soft blankets, wrapping the family in spiritual security before physical rest began. The prayers weren't empty recitations, but deeply felt requests that addressed real medieval concerns. People genuinely believed that demons and evil spirits were most active during the night hours, when human consciousness was lowered and spiritual defenses were weakest. Sleep prayers specifically asked for protection against these night terrors, against bad dreams that might disturb rest, and against the fear that could keep people awake when they needed restoration. Picture a young mother tucking her children into their straw beds, making the sign of the cross over each small forehead while whispering ancient prayers of protection. Her voice would be barely audible, but the children would recognize the familiar words and feel their comfort settling over them like an extra blanket. These weren't superstitions, but practical spiritual technology, developed over centuries to ensure peaceful rest. In monasteries, the sleep rituals became even more elaborate and beautiful. After the final prayers of the day, monks would process silently to their dormitories, each carrying a small blessing, a sprig of blessed herbs, a tiny relic, or perhaps just a smooth stone from the monastery garden that had been touched by decades of faithful hands. These simple objects carried the weight of prayer and community blessing into their individual rest. The arrangement of medieval bedrooms often reflected these spiritual concerns. Crucifixes weren't just decorative, but were positioned so that sleeping people would be under their protection throughout the night. Holy water might be sprinkled on beds and bedding, and blessed herbs like rosemary or lavender would be tucked into mattresses, not just for pleasant scents, but for their believed power to repel evil influences. Some households maintained special sleep blessings for different seasons or circumstances. During storms, when thunder might wake sleeping children, there were particular prayers asking for calm rest despite nature's turbulence. During times of illness, sleep blessings would focus on healing and restoration. When travelers were present, the family prayers would extend protection to these temporary members of the household.
The morning prayers were equally important, marking the safe completion of the night's journey. Upon waking, medieval people would immediately offer thanks for protection received, for dreams granted or nightmares prevented, for the simple blessing of awakening healthy and whole. These weren't lengthy ceremonies, but quick, heartfelt acknowledgments that each successful night's rest was a gift not to be taken for granted. Children's sleep rituals were particularly tender and elaborate. Parents would not only say prayers with their little ones, but would often tell gentle religious stories,
designed to populate young minds with holy images before sleep. Saints' lives provided comfort and protection, with children learning about guardian angels who watched specifically over sleeping children, about holy people who had experienced beautiful dreams and visions. Picture a medieval father sitting beside his child's bed, speaking in low, soothing tones about Saint Nicholas protecting sleeping children, or about angels who sing lullabies too beautiful for waking ears to hear. These stories weren't meant to excite or stimulate, but to fill the child's imagination with protective, peaceful images that would influence their dreams and help them rest without fear. The physical preparation for sleep also carried spiritual significance. Washing hands and face before bed wasn't just about cleanliness, but about ritual purification, removing the day's spiritual as well as physical contamination. Combing hair was sometimes accompanied by prayers, and the simple act of removing day clothes and putting on night garments marked a transition from worldly to spiritual concerns. Some medieval sleep rituals involved the entire community. In small villages, the evening bell would ring not just to mark time, but to remind everyone to begin their bedtime prayers. For a few moments, the entire community would be united in the same spiritual activity, creating a collective shield of prayer over the sleeping village. Imagine that sense of connection and protection, knowing that your neighbors were all asking for the same divine protection that you sought for your own family. Seasonal variations added richness to these sleep rituals. During Advent, the 4 weeks before Christmas, bedtime prayers might include special requests for peaceful hearts to prepare for the holy season. During Lent, sleep rituals might emphasize penitence and spiritual preparation. The longest nights of winter called for prayers about light returning, while summer nights might include gratitude for the day's warmth and growth. These sacred sleep rituals created a bridge between the conscious and unconscious mind, between the day's activities and night's rest, between individual vulnerability and divine protection. They transformed what could be a frightening daily dissolution of consciousness into a gentle, supported journey toward restoration and spiritual renewal. As you prepare for your own rest tonight, you might appreciate the wisdom in these ancient practices, the act of acknowledging sleep as something sacred, of asking for protection and peace, of treating the transition to unconsciousness as worthy of ceremony and care. Whether through traditional prayers or simple moments of gratitude and intention, you can create your own gentle bridge between day and night, your own ritual of protection and peace as you drift into dreams.
Let yourself sink deeper into the soft mystery of medieval sleeping arrangements
as we explore one of the most charming and practical aspects of nighttime life in centuries past, the beloved custom of sharing beds not just with family members, but with a fascinating array of animal companions who served as living hot water bottles, alarm clocks, and furry guardians through the long, dark nights. Picture yourself settling into a medieval bed around 1350, feeling the familiar weight of a small, warm body curling up against your feet. This might be a lapdog, not the pampered pet of modern imagination, but a working member of the household whose job was to provide warmth and companionship during the cold nights. These little dogs, often spaniels or terriers, were bred specifically for their ability to generate heat and their loyalty to their human sleeping partners. The practice was so common that wealthy households often kept special bed dogs whose primary purpose was nighttime companionship. These dogs would be bathed regularly, fed well to keep their coats thick and healthy, and trained from puppyhood to sleep quietly and still. They learned to recognize their human sleep patterns, staying motionless during deep sleep, but ready to provide comfort if their person stirred or seemed distressed. But dogs weren't the only animal companions in medieval beds. In rural areas, particularly during the coldest months, it wasn't unusual to find a piglet or young goat sharing sleeping space with the family. These animals were chosen for their size and temperament, small enough not to take up too much room, docile enough to sleep peacefully, and warm enough to make a real difference in comfort during bitter winter nights. Imagine the gentle sounds these animal companions would add to the nighttime symphony: the soft snuffling of a sleeping piglet, the quiet whimpering of a dog lost in dreams, the contented sigh of a well-fed goat settling in for the night. These weren't disturbing noises, but comforting ones, signs of life and warmth in the darkness, natural sounds that told sleeping humans they weren't alone. Cats, of course, were frequent bed companions, though their presence served multiple purposes beyond warmth. Medieval people understood that cats were essential for controlling the rodent populations that could overrun grain stores and spread disease. A cat in the bed meant fewer chances of mice or rats disturbing sleep, and their natural hunting instincts provided a layer of protection that sleeping humans couldn't maintain for themselves. The relationship between medieval people and their animal bed companions was deeply practical, but also genuinely affectionate. These weren't wild animals forced into service, but domestic creatures who had evolved alongside humans specifically for this kind of close companionship. The mutual benefit was obvious. Animals received warmth, protection, and regular feeding, while humans gained heat, comfort, and a sense of security. In monasteries, the rules about animal bed companions were more strictly regulated, but even religious communities recognized their practical value. Some monastic orders allowed cats to sleep in dormitories to control pests, and working dogs might be permitted to sleep near their handlers. The practical needs of community life often overcame strict interpretations of rules about purity or separation from worldly concerns. The care and training of these sleeping companions became a specialized knowledge passed down through generations. Parents would teach children how to share a bed respectfully with animals, how to move slowly, how to recognize when an animal needed space, how to interpret different sounds and movements. This created a generation of people who were naturally comfortable with animal companionship and understood the subtle communications of interspecies relationships.
The seasonal aspects of animal bed companions were particularly important. During summer months, when warmth wasn't needed, many animals would sleep outside or in barns. But as autumn arrived and temperatures dropped, the migration back to human beds would begin. Families would prepare for winter, partly by ensuring their animal companions were healthy and well-fed, ready to provide months of nighttime warmth and comfort. Some medieval households developed elaborate sleeping hierarchies that included both human and animal members. The most favored animals might sleep closest to the family's heads, while larger or less refined creatures would occupy foot areas. Status within the family group applied to animals as well as humans, with long-time companion animals earning preferred sleeping spots through years of faithful service. The health benefits of these arrangements were recognized even in medieval times. Physicians noted that people who slept with animal companions seemed to rest more peacefully, suffered fewer nightmares, and often recovered more quickly from illnesses. The warmth helped with joint pain and circulation, while the companionship provided emotional comfort that aided healing. These animal sleeping companions also played important roles in children's development. Young ones learned responsibility by caring for their sleeping partners, developed empathy through daily interaction with non-human creatures, and gained confidence from having loyal companions who depended on them. Many medieval adults recalled their childhood sleeping animals with deep fondness, describing them as among their most treasured relationships. The practice began to decline as houses became larger and heating improved, but in many rural areas, animal bed companions remained common well into the 18th and 19th centuries. Even today, the human desire for animal companionship during sleep persists, though modern pet arrangements are usually more about emotional comfort than survival necessity. As you rest tonight, you might imagine the gentle presence of these faithful animal companions, their steady breathing, their instinctive protectiveness, their simple contentment in sharing warmth and space with their human families. There's something deeply comforting about the idea of sleeping in the company of creatures who ask for nothing more than warmth and companionship, offering in return
their own peaceful presence and unwavering loyalty. Let their memory settle around you now, these gentle guardians of medieval sleep, reminding you that rest can be a shared experience, that comfort comes in many forms, and that sometimes the most profound peace is found not in solitude, but in the simple presence of another living being breathing quietly beside you in the dark.
Settle deeper into your comfortable bed as we explore the fascinating world of medieval sleeping positions and the ingenious, if sometimes uncomfortable, furniture that medieval people created for their nightly rest. What might surprise you most is how different their approach to sleep posture was from our modern habits. Shaped by both practical necessity and spiritual beliefs that influenced every aspect of how they arranged their bodies for sleep. Picture yourself approaching a medieval bed around 1450, if you were fortunate enough to encounter one of the more elaborate sleeping arrangements. These weren't the flat, horizontal surfaces we're used to, but often wedge-shaped constructions that kept sleepers in a semi-upright position throughout the night. Medical wisdom of the time held that sleeping completely flat was dangerous for health, potentially allowing disease-causing vapors to settle in the lungs or creating conditions that might stop the heart. Instead, medieval people often slept propped up at angles that would seem uncomfortable to us today. Bolsters, long cylindrical pillows filled with straw, feathers, or even stone chips, were arranged to keep the head and upper body elevated. Imagine resting against these firm supports, your body angled so that your head was significantly higher than your feet, in a position that physicians believed promoted better breathing and circulation. The reasoning behind these elevated sleeping positions was quite sophisticated for its time. Medieval medical texts, influenced by ancient Greek and Roman physicians, taught that the human body contained various humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, that needed to remain in proper balance for health. Sleeping flat was thought to allow these humors to pool incorrectly, while sleeping elevated encouraged proper flow and prevented dangerous accumulations. But the most intriguing medieval sleeping position was one that virtually no one practices today: sleeping while sitting up. In many households, particularly among the working classes and in crowded conditions, people would sleep leaning against walls, sitting on benches, or propped in corners. This wasn't due to lack of space alone, but reflected a belief that this position was actually healthier and more natural than lying down.
Picture a medieval great hall after dinner, with dozens of people settling in for the night. Some would lie on pallets, but many others would simply lean back against the stone walls, wrap themselves in cloaks, and sleep sitting upright. Their heads would gradually drop forward or to the side as sleep deepened, but their bodies remained essentially vertical throughout the night. Remarkably, people could achieve deep restorative sleep in these positions, something most modern people would find nearly impossible. Travelers especially became expert at sleeping while sitting. Medieval inns were crowded, expensive places where bed space was at a premium. Common travelers might pay for nothing more than a spot leaning against a wall in the common room, sharing space with dozens of others in similar positions. They would wrap themselves in their traveling cloaks, use their packs as back supports, and sleep as peacefully as if they were in the finest beds.
The furniture designed for these sleeping positions was often ingeniously crafted for dual purposes. During the day, a bench might serve for seating during meals or work. At night, with the addition of a few cushions and a back support, it would transform into a sleeping surface. These transforming pieces of furniture made efficient use of limited space and resources while accommodating the medieval preference for elevated sleep. Monastery dormitories often featured sleeping arrangements that seem almost punitive by modern standards, but were considered healthy and spiritually beneficial in their time. Monks might sleep on narrow wooden platforms with only a thin straw mattress, using wooden blocks as pillows. Some religious orders encouraged sleeping on bare wood as a form of penance, believing that physical discomfort during sleep would purify the soul and bring them closer to divine understanding. The sleeping positions themselves were often dictated by religious considerations. Many medieval peoples believed it was important to sleep facing east, toward Jerusalem and the rising sun, as a way of orienting their dreams and souls toward divine light. Beds in monasteries and devout households were often positioned to accommodate this directional sleeping, with the head always pointing toward the sacred east. Children's sleeping arrangements were particularly creative and space efficient. Trundle beds that could be rolled under larger beds during the day were common, as were hanging cradles that could be suspended from ceiling beams to rock gently with any movement in the house. Some children slept in wooden boxes that served as both beds and storage for their few possessions, a practical solution that taught them early about the efficiency necessary for medieval life. The wealthy developed increasingly elaborate sleeping furniture that seems almost theatrical by modern standards. Four-poster beds with heavy curtains weren't just for privacy, but created warm enclosed spaces
that could be heated with warming pans filled with hot coals. These bedchambers within chambers had their own microclimates, separate from the often cold and drafty rooms that surrounded them. Some noble beds were so large and elaborate that they required step stools to climb into, and once inside, the sleeper was surrounded by pillows, bolsters, and supports that maintained specific positions throughout the night. The curtains could be drawn completely closed, creating a private world within the bed where couples could talk intimately or individuals could pray without being observed. The materials used in medieval sleeping furniture tell their own fascinating story. Straw mattresses were constantly refreshed and changed as people understood that old straw could harbor pests and develop unpleasant odors. Feather beds, when available, were treasured possessions passed down through generations, with new feathers added periodically to maintain their loft and comfort. Pillows filled with herbs were common not just for pleasant scents, but for their believed medicinal properties. Lavender was thought to promote peaceful sleep, rosemary to improve memory and prevent nightmares, and chamomile to calm restless minds. The simple act of laying one's head on these herb-filled pillows was believed to provide both physical and spiritual benefits throughout the night. The evolution of sleeping positions also reflected changing ideas about the relationship between mind and body during rest. Some medieval physicians believed that certain sleeping positions could influence dreams, with side sleeping promoting different types of visions than back sleeping. Left side sleeping was sometimes associated with earthly dreams, while right side sleeping was thought to encourage more spiritual or prophetic visions. As you rest in your modern bed tonight, you might experiment with some of these ancient sleeping wisdom traditions. Try elevating your head slightly more than usual, or spend a few moments considering which direction you're facing and what that might mean to you. While we don't need to adopt the sometimes uncomfortable practices of medieval sleep, there's something intriguing about connecting with these ancient understandings of how position and posture affect our rest. Let yourself appreciate the evolution that has brought us to our current comfort, while also honoring the ingenuity and thoughtfulness that medieval people brought to their nightly rest. Their careful attention to sleeping positions and furniture design reflects a deep understanding that how we sleep is just as important as how much we sleep, and that comfort comes in many forms across the centuries. As we reach the gentle conclusion of our journey through medieval sleep customs, let yourself drift deeper into the most mysterious and enchanting aspect of medieval nighttime, the elaborate rituals and beliefs surrounding dreams, protection, and the spiritual significance of the hours between dusk and dawn, when the boundaries between the physical and spiritual worlds were believed to be at their thinnest. Picture yourself in a medieval chamber as the last light fades from the western windows, preparing for sleep in an age when dreams were not mere random neural firings, but messages from divine realms, prophetic visions, and sometimes dangerous encounters with supernatural forces. Every medieval person went to sleep knowing that their dreams might bring guidance from angels, warnings from saints, or temptations from demons, making the preparation for sleep a matter of spiritual as well as physical importance. The ritual began with the careful arrangement of protective objects around the sleeping space. Holy metals might be placed under pillows, not as mere symbols, but as active spiritual shields that would guard the sleeper's soul during its nightly journey through the dream realm. Rosary beads would be wrapped around bedposts or kept close at hand, their blessed nature creating circles of protection around the vulnerable sleeping form. Some households maintained special dream preparation ceremonies that were passed down through generations of women, from mothers to daughters, grandmother to granddaughter. These wise women would prepare herbal mixtures, not just for pleasant scents, but for their believed ability to influence the types of dreams that would come during sleep. Mugwort was burned for prophetic dreams, vervain for protection against nightmares, and jasmine for dreams of love and happiness. Imagine a medieval grandmother, her weathered hands moving with practiced efficiency as she prepared her family for sleep. She would sprinkle blessed salt at the corners of sleeping areas, mutter protective prayers in half-remembered Latin, and tell gentle stories designed to populate young minds with holy images that would influence their dreams. Her voice would be soft and rhythmic, creating a bridge between waking consciousness and the mystery of sleep. The interpretation of dreams was taken so seriously that many medieval households kept dream journals, recording particularly vivid or unusual nighttime visions for later analysis. Dreams of saints were considered especially significant, possibly indicating that the dreamer was being called to a more religious life. Dreams of deceased family members were thought to be actual visits from souls in purgatory, perhaps requesting prayers or offering guidance to the living. Children were taught to pay special attention to their dreams and to report significant ones to their parents or local clergy. A child who dreamed repeatedly of angels might be destined for religious life, while dreams of specific saints could indicate which patron the child should honor throughout their life. These weren't superstitions, but practical spiritual guidance systems that helped people understand their place in the cosmic order. The physical preparation for meaningful dreams involved specific dietary practices. Light evening meals were preferred, as heavy food was thought to produce disturbing or meaningless dreams. Some people would fast partially before sleep, believing that a slightly empty stomach created better conditions for receiving divine messages. Others would consume small amounts of bread blessed by priests, incorporating sacred nourishment into their dream preparation. Water played a crucial role in medieval sleep protection rituals. Bowls of holy water might be placed near beds, not just for emergency blessings, but because the water itself was believed to purify the air around sleeping people. Some families would sprinkle holy water on bed linens, creating blessed sleeping surfaces that would repel evil influences throughout the night. The positioning of religious images around sleeping areas was carefully considered. Crucifixes were placed where sleeping people could see them immediately upon waking, ensuring that the first sight of each new day would be a holy one. Pictures of patron saints were arranged to watch over sleeping family members, their painted eyes providing spiritual surveillance through the dangerous hours of darkness.
Monasteries developed the most sophisticated approaches to sacred sleep preparation. Monks would spend the final hours before compline, the last prayers of the day, in silent meditation, preparing their minds for whatever dreams might come. They believed that a properly prepared soul could receive divine instruction through dreams, with some of history's greatest saints reporting that important spiritual insights came to them during sleep. The seasonal variations in dream preparation rituals reflected the medieval understanding that different times of year brought different spiritual energies. During Advent, the 4 weeks before Christmas, sleep preparations would focus on readiness for divine revelation, with special prayers asking for dreams that would prepare hearts for the coming celebration. During Lent, dream rituals emphasized repentance and spiritual purification. The most fascinating aspect of medieval dream culture was the belief in shared or prophetic dreams that could affect entire communities. When multiple people in a village reported similar dreams, perhaps of approaching danger or coming good fortune, these were taken as serious warnings or promises that required community response. Village leaders would meet to discuss such dreams and plan appropriate actions. Weather patterns were also believed to influence dream quality and meaning. Thunder during sleep was thought to indicate divine displeasure or coming change, while gentle rain was considered favorable for peaceful dreams. Snow falling while people slept was seen as purifying, cleansing away the spiritual residue of difficult days and preparing dreamers for fresh starts. The morning rituals that concluded these nighttime spiritual journeys were equally important. Upon waking, medieval people would immediately examine their memories of the night's dreams, offering prayers of thanksgiving for good visions or protection from disturbing ones. Significant dreams would be discussed with family members or spiritual advisors, becoming part of the ongoing spiritual guidance that shaped daily decisions and life directions. Some medieval communities maintained dream-sharing traditions where people would gather weekly to discuss their nighttime visions, looking for patterns or messages that might benefit the entire group. These gatherings served both spiritual and social functions, creating bonds of shared spiritual experience while providing collective wisdom about the meaning of various dream symbols and themes.
The decline of these elaborate sleep protection and dream interpretation traditions paralleled the rise of more rational, scientific approaches to understanding sleep and dreams. But something profound may have been lost in this transition: the sense that our sleeping hours are spiritually significant, that dreams deserve attention and respect, and that the preparation for sleep can be a sacred act worthy of care and ritual. As you prepare for your own rest tonight, you might consider what elements of these ancient practices could enrich your modern sleep experience. Perhaps a moment of gratitude before closing your eyes, a brief reflection on the day's events, or simply an acknowledgement that the hours of sleep ahead are not empty time, but a mysterious journey deserving of respect and gentle preparation. Let the wisdom of these medieval sleep guardians settle around you now, their understanding that rest is sacred, that dreams carry meaning, and that the transition from wakefulness to sleep deserves the same care and attention we give to any important journey. May their ancient knowledge of protection and peace guide you into the gentle realm of dreams, where you can rest safely under the same stars that watched over centuries of sleeping souls before you.
And so, dear friends, we've wandered together through the quiet chambers and humble cottages of medieval nights, discovering that sleep in ages past was never simple rest, but a complex dance of community, spirituality, and practical wisdom. From the natural rhythm of two sleeps to the comfort of animal companions, from sacred protection rituals to the sharing of dreams and beds, these gentle people understood something about rest that we may have forgotten in our rush toward modern efficiency. May these memories of ancient sleeping wisdom guide you into peaceful dreams tonight. May you rest with the knowledge that sleep is sacred, that comfort comes in many forms, and that the night has always held its own gentle mysteries for those who approach it with respect and wonder. If this quiet journey through history helped you unwind and drift toward rest, let me know in the comments below, and feel free to share where you're listening from around the world. If these stories brought you peace, tap like and subscribe only if it feels right to you. Sweet dreams, fellow travelers through the night, until we meet again in the soft realm between waking and sleeping. May your rest be as peaceful as those medieval souls who knew that every night's sleep is a small miracle, every dawn a gentle blessing, and every dream a whisper from the mysterious world that waits just beyond the edge of consciousness. Sleep well.